Okay, so we'll move on to our next section, which looks at digitisation in the supply chain. We have two speakers and they have two short presentations to give. First up, we have William McColgan, Director of McColgan Quality Foods Limited. So if we could welcome William up to the stage. William's here to talk about their digitisation journey within McColgan's and how they've partnered with resources in Northern Ireland and further afield to support their journey. McColgan's Quality Foods, so they're a family-run business and they began serving food in Strabane when they opened a tea shop in 1940. A cafe, a butcher's, a bakery followed. They started producing award-winning sausage rolls in 1978. They proved so popular the business had to build new premises on the edge of town to keep up with demand. Today they ship a variety of savoury pastries from their state-of-the-art facility in Strabane across Ireland, Great Britain and Europe, and no doubt this will make you hungry for lunch as well. So I'll hand over to William. Thank you.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone, and happy Pie Week. Yeah, people know it was Pie Week this week. Pie Week. Yeah. So that's my first slide covered already. Ben and I have both prepared about 20 minutes of slides, but we've accepted the challenge to get through them all and not delay lunch. So swiftly on. That's most of what was just run through. We were this little tea shop in the middle of Abercorn Square in the beginning, and then we moved over to a site just around the corner, and we had that lovely synergy of the bakery and the butchers getting together and doing sausage rolls, which proved so good we had to build a bigger factory. And the second generation took over about that point. My grandfather started the business. And then in about 2018, 2019, the second generation started getting ill and dying and having strokes and things like that. So in 2022, my sister and I bought the business out. I'm quite new to the business. I came back from America, which is why I talk funny. So we bought the business out and we had to think about how we're going to start over. What was our inflection point going to be? And so we set out to do just this. It sounds cliche, but we did. We set out to completely rethink the culture, the process, and the technology that supported that. The culture, I think, prior could have been described charitably as kind of old school. You know, it was very command and control. It was very direct. There had been years of recruiting, retaining, rewarding people who did what they were told. And it was, as I say, it was very centralized. And anybody who studied a business or seen a business grow will recognize this journey. And we had to get to a point where it had come to a point where that had kind of plateaued and it wasn't scaling any further because all decisions were centralized. There was no initiative. There was no empowerment of people in the departments. And it's a classic tale. So how we went about changing the culture was we replaced all of the directors. My sister is the only director still there since 2018. We brought in experienced directors from bigger companies to show how these things work at the companies at the scale we wanted to get to. We have Nigel Cairns in the audience here. Nigel, we convinced to come over, take a risk and come over from Dale Farm, and he's done miraculous things in his tenure as commercial director at McColgan's. The process, we found, again, it was top down and people were expected to use their common sense. But again, that tends not to scale. We saw an example last week where the guy who regularly does the ovens was on holiday and we were burning a lot of sausage rolls. So again, this spoke to a process that wasn't well documented, wasn't very consistent, had to be standardized. And the technology then that we'll get into quickly is really what enables those things. So there are things that people do well, and there are things that we know that machines, computers do better. And we want to make best use of the people resources we have and leave the rest of the stuff to other systems. So we started our digital ramp up with an ERP. We put in a proper ERP. We had been using Sage, and no exaggeration, about that much paper a day. So we'd push stuff through Sage, we'd come up with spreadsheets, and at the end of the day, we'd push through to all the departments, lots of sheets of paper. This doesn't give us then much data to work with. We have a continuous improvement. We have a lean transformation that we've been on with the assistance of our hosts here. Vesta and I have been very generous in helping us on our lean journey. But the continuous improvement needs data. And when we just have people following things and we're doing all the traceability and all the quality and it's all happening on data, we don't have much to work with in terms of examining, understanding, progressing our process. So we put this ERP in, it's been a lot of work. We continue to work on that. It's been years more work than we expected it to be, but we've learned a lot about our own process and what we need to understand about our own process as we go. And that's what we build on. Now we have the beginning of something with our work orders or traceability or materials are now captured digitally, and we can do other things with that now as we proceed. So I imagine all of that sounds very expensive, but I guess that the topic of my quick presentation here is it doesn't necessarily have to be, and I'd like to talk about some of the avenues that McColgans and some of the resources that McColgans have leveraged in order for it not to have been as expensive as you might think so far. If you're a SME, as we are, or if you're a food company, as we are, or if you're both, you probably know there aren't hundreds of thousands of pounds to be investing in digital improvements and things with less obvious ROI than new pieces of kit and maintenance and things like that. So here are some of the avenues we've gone down locally in order to do it on the cheap. Invest and I have been very helpful. They've been coaching our head of procurement and supply chain. Megan, would you like to? No, all right. Megan is she's working directly with the folk at Invest NI, and we're seeing great improvements and very, very valuable improvements already in terms of our procurement process and our supply process. We work a lot with CAFRE. CAFRE are on site today with some of their HLA level 7s, getting a look at McColgans and how all this comes into practice. But we work with them on their part of AMIC, which I'm sure folks in the Belfast area recognize as the advanced manufacturing thing. NITC are moving out to Newton Abbey and building a big multi-million factory. It's all very exciting. And the food-specific part is happening at the Lochreed campus in CAFRE. So as part, I'm past halfway already, dear God. So the food part, we work with them on a proof of concept. We've worked with the Northern College. We work on a lot of skill-up programs. We get funded talent through HLAs. We're working with the Hartree program. And then I'll tee up just before I hand over to Ben on what we've done with Digital Catapult. As I say, the thing we did with CAFRE was we did a pilot where they built a digital model of our plant. So we have a digital copy of the factory, of the orders coming into the start of the production lines, going through the ovens, going down the packing lines, and we're able to simulate a day's production. Now we have 200 SKUs, I think, and we manufacture 5 days a week. So that's a lot of complexity, and there's a lot happening. We do pies, we do sausage rolls, we do quiches, we do slices, we do jambons, we do all kinds of things. And by the time we were able to simulate this with the guys at NITC, it became clear. It took such convoluted code and logic. It told us very clearly that we need to simplify our processes and codify them in a way you can expect people to be making decisions on the fly, which was near impossible as it was. I thought this was really, really cool. And then my 9-year-old had a look at it and showed me in Roblox, these tycoon games. It's basically a tycoon in Roblox, if anybody's familiar with that. We have a team from the Northern College at the minute doing a value chain mapping on our entire supply chain process. So in that way, we've been able to tap into these funded programs with the universities to get best in class thinking on supply chain problems. I think the most significant thing we've done is to develop our own digital talent. It's a lot of stuff. If you go to consultancies or if you go to big providers, it does get very expensive very quickly because people are intimidated by some of the technology speak. They're intimidated by some of the technologies. And I don't think we have to be, even as SMEs. We've used this as a tool with some of our folks who are doing apprenticeships. Now we have people doing, we have skills up happening at Queen's in software development. Megan's doing University of Ulster. She's doing a HLA there. We have 4 HLAs happening at CAFRE, and we have somebody doing a supply chain HLA at Northern Regional College. And all these things are funded. And you have the benefit of best-in-class education and the skills and the access to the lecturers coming directly into the company like that. I can't stress enough how valuable this has been for us to grow our own. We're working with the Hartree Centre at the University of Ulster. So I'll describe quickly. At McColgan's, we make a very perishable good. So those sausage rolls come off the line, and they've got 18 days for the best before date. And they have to be at the store with either 12, 14, 16 days, depending on who the customer is. So we have to get this right. If we make too much, we generate waste. If we don't make enough, we miss a sale. And this is quite a fine balance to make from week to week, and we don't have good forecasting on that. So Hartree are working with us to build a machine learning predictive model, looking at our years of sales history. We do something quite crude at the minute. We look at prior sales and do a simple arithmetic thing on it. We're building a digital model hand in hand with the Hartree folks, and they're showing us how to use AWS. They're showing us how to use those ML models. And it's not out with our grasp. We have a guy who had really good A-levels, and he came into us, and he's doing one of these HLAs now in business technology, and it's working for us. And we're capable of reaching into these technologies, not intimidated by them. We're working with a local blockchain company to make available all of our lab results, the ones that they're entitled to. They can see them. They don't have to come to us and ask us to produce the PDF. All of that has been automated through a blockchain that we developed in conjunction with the guys at Digital Catapult. And man, it goes fast up here once you get going. Yeah. Digital Catapult's been great. A lot of these performance improvements or these process improvements we're not keen to share with our competitors because obviously it's our competitive advantage. But when it comes to this digital supply chain stuff, there's actually a great network effect. If we could convince Tesco, Aldi, and Lidl that they required this kind of transparency into our lab results, we'd have a competitive advantage through it. But if we can convince them and we can convince our competitors, if everybody's using these supply chain things, you can't really have success just locally. They have to involve upstream, they have to involve downstream. And that's where an organization like Digital Catapult has been helping us change the industry. Thank you.
Thanks, William. And yes, nice to meet you all. I'm Ben from Digital Catapult, and here to tell you a bit about the work that we're doing across the UK. But also, I was really inspired by Damien's talk, so I'm going to try and bring in some of the journey that he was talking about. So we're a UK government-funded organisation. We have an office in Belfast with Sue over there as part of the team. And we run the Digital Supply Chain Hub, which is £30 million investment from government to look at industry, to look at how do we digitalise supply chains. And you know, when we think about supply chains, we think about the problem. Let's think about what the problem in supply chain is, and then how we might reframe that. Because for everybody here, you know, a supply chain is you don't have much visibility into your supply chain. I would guess, right? All the systems in those supply chains are disconnected. There's very little visibility, and as a result, very little optimization in the supply chain. And the opportunity that presents is abstract at best for most people. So, how can we reframe that problem? So first of all, the problem, reframe a supply chain. There's three flows in the supply chain. There's materials, there's money, and there's information. And because today the information doesn't flow in the supply chain, in most supply chains, materials and money are wasted by about 30%. We see it very evidently in food, but in most supply chains, bad information means materials and money are wasted by about 30%. And that's a massive reframing of the problem. So if we think about that, what's our first step is to dream, right? So once we've got that problem. So first, the dream then for us is how can we optimize the flow of information by deploying advanced tech, as William just described. How can we optimize the flow of information to help companies make better decisions to optimize the flows of materials and money and return value back to business, society, and the environment? Because that cost of that is currently, of the bad flows, the poor flows, it's currently being borne by business, society, and the environment. So how can we have better information to improve the flows of materials and money and return value back to business and the environment? So that's our dream. That's where we want to get to. And so the real challenge for what we want to deliver is bringing additional 30% back to business. So you can optimize your own factory operations, your warehouse and logistics. For your factory, you might have an incremental impact of 2 to 5% every year, but that's never going to keep you ahead of inflation. It's never going to keep you ahead of additional costs that you're having in your supply chain. So how do we achieve that 30%? That's our dream, and that's really what we want to put in place. And our entire program is really established to help companies take that leap. And the leap that we're looking at here is, first of all, their ambition is let's digitalize supply chains. Through that, we do that through improving information flow between yourselves and your supply chain. We talked about collaboration earlier on. Scope 3 emissions is all about better flow of information. That helps you make better decisions. It then helps those better decisions help you improve the flows of materials and money in your business. And then you can generate, capture, and crucially share the value with those that you participated with. So that's what we do as a general flow of activity to support companies on that journey. It sounds good, but in practice, how does it actually happen, right? So here's an example. First of all, order optimization. How can you have an 18% reduction in your pick, pack, and ship costs, right? It's a big number. Some people don't believe it, but if we're going to hold true to that dream and help companies take the leap, this is an example of what we did. So first of all, business as usual. And this was with a very big retailer in Northern Ireland and across the UK. But these guys are in Northern Ireland, this experiment was. So basically, they were traditionally optimized business inventory levels by focusing on exactly what they need in their warehouse, not thinking about the broader implications. And they would then issue out an order to be replenished to hit those exact inventory levels for their own factory without thinking about the impact for suppliers and MOQs. What that meant then is that the suppliers were then having to pick, pack, and ship, not meeting their MOQs. It was a higher pick, pack, and ship cost. And obviously that had a cascade effect into all the logistics and the truck fill and so on. Then when the pallet arrives back at the depot, it takes 3 times longer to unpack that pallet because it's a multi-layered pallet. There's a variety of different products in there. But at least I'm hitting my inventory levels that I want to have in my warehouse, right? And that 3 times cost isn't normally accounted for by businesses. So what do? We built an AI solution, working with a company that's already embedded with a lot of experience in the sector to meet the shared MOQ, so hit the ideal number between the buyer and the supplier to deliver on that value. And we delivered an 18% reduction in cost. That solution is now being deployed across a big network. It's saving millions of pounds a year. The next project we're doing, which we're still in the process of, is when you combine that capability with route optimization of your trucks and optimizing truck fill, we're achieving above 50% savings in the pick, pack, and logistics costs, which is obviously a huge deal to any business, right? But the only way to realize those benefits is to share them, right? Another area of an example, how can we reduce waste in the supply chain, in the food supply chain by 30%? Well, one large retailer had a very low an accuracy rate of forecasting for 86%. So some people that's good, some people it's average. But what that meant is sometimes their product availability, sell-through rates, and waste were not at optimal levels. The knock-on effect of that is there's a large amount of waste in the supply chain, bullwhip effect, people carrying too much inventory, not selling it through at an optimal price. So what do? We built an AI tool again, funded an AI tool to transform that planning accuracy from 86 to 98%. Being able to incorporate all areas from kind of understanding the impact of weather and seasonal events, and also looking at supply shocks as well as demand signals. And the impact of that, my formatting's off, was this 27% reduction in downgrades, 30% in reduction in waste, 9% improvement in availability, and about a 67% impact on actual profitability. So those are 2 examples how we deliver on that dream and actually tangibly making this happen now, supporting companies to then scale those capabilities out into the market. What we're doing across the whole program, so this is going to be a very busy slide, but it's a bit like a menu. So the 3 areas in the supply chain to enable those 3 flows, to deliver that 30%, is around collaboration, resilience, and sustainability. We break those down into a series of 7 challenges, which you can see here, which are all interrelated and have many connections between them all. But those 7 challenges help to address industry needs, and industry set these needs at the beginning of the program. And hopefully in here you'll notice significant areas of interest for you or areas of priority in you, because this is what industry tell us they need. We then built out and funded, we're now working with nearly 140 companies now to build out technology solutions. We've got about 50 tech solutions that we're now funding, as William mentioned, some of those with Ubiquity and others in their program. And I don't know if you can see this, but this is an overview. This is like a menu of the digital capabilities that we're building. But these capabilities are generally built on a CSV or a download of some sort to help develop that kind of core technology tool. But what we want to do is prove out that 30%. So we've now set up 4 basic digital twin environments, one in food, one in hydrogen, one in automotive spare parts, and the other one in textiles, the circular textiles, to then create real data environments where we have real material and money flows in the supply chains. So we can actually pull data and then deploy these solutions into those real data environments to prove that 30% and to de-risk the adoption of the technology tools. So really look at this as almost like a menu of capabilities, which we're creating the menu in the innovation layer at the top. The deployment layer, the test beds, is almost like, I'm carrying on a restaurant synergy here, but basically that you can try before you buy in that environment. And then we're building out an adoption layer, which is really how we help to organize the demand and motivate demand for technology tools. And this is too detailed. But if you think about it, we're organizing the supply of technology tools through the innovation layer. We're demonstrating it through the deployment layer. And then we're helping to drive adoption through the innovation layer. And the innovation layer is really what we're about to launch now. The adoption layer is what we're about to launch now. And this is the online community that we're about to launch. So first of all is helping people take that leap is to get inspired and learn. So you can see there's a whole range of digital supply chain fundamentals. What's the art of possible for tech? How do you build a roadmap, etc. To really inspire people in the art of the possible. Demonstrate that this is achievable, that your friends, your peers can actually make this work happen. Then once people are inspired, we then build there's an online collaboration capability called Circles, where you can run an innovation project through the platform. You can access partners and be connected with people, tools, and resources to better deliver any supply chain digitalization work. And then we've got a build capability, which is almost like an app store where you'll be able to soon access the capabilities that mentioned here. It's all about making the journey easier for people. It's going to be very user-friendly. It's going to have a kind of a LinkedIn meets WhatsApp capability, which you can see it looks fairly pretty here, even though you can't really see the images much. But it'll be a very accessible platform that you can use to all of your supply chain needs will be established in there. And then the final piece here is some access to funding. So there are existing programs that we've funded and supported. And you can see here is a breakdown. So one in the food sector is around mandatory compliance to legislation. So how do you shift from paper to digital processes in compliance to legislation? Secondly is around sustainability marketplace it's like a waste marketplace, so connecting creators of waste to buyers of waste in textiles. We then got a supply chain visibility tool to help people map and understand the activities in their supply chain across their chain, and then another one around input costing. So how do you identify your current input cost base and then find a way to improve that in collaboration with your suppliers. So these are all discounts that we offer on these tech tools that are coming out of the platform. And so that's really what we're here to do, is in just building back into Damien's points in terms of dreaming. We have the dream around optimizing the 3 flows. We want to help make that leap. When it comes to fighting, I don't think we should be talking about that one today, but there is support to help people go through that journey. And then really the whole thing is about helping people climb up to head towards that destination and to really arrive at the ability to deliver on that goal, to optimize the flows of materials and money and generate additional 30%, not just for your business, but across the entire supply chain. That's what we're really here about. So the question that we've got to ask is, we've done a bit in Northern Ireland. We'd like to do a lot more. There is some funding that we have in our program, but by working together, by establishing some kind of a network, which we'd love to facilitate and coordinate, maybe we could do a lot more in Northern Ireland. And really then the baton really is over to you guys. Would you like to do more collaboratively to digitalize supply chains and help us go on that journey to achieve that dream? So that's it. I think we've run out of time there. But any questions? No questions. Lunch. Okay. We're here all day. Thanks.